GamingBolt presents 15 hardest areas in the entire Dark Souls series. Did you know Dark Souls is hard? A lot of people don't know that. Once every few hours while playing, you die. In real life. It's just like Demon Souls. In this feature, we're going to talk about just how hard it is. We're going to take a look at 15 of the hardest areas in the entire Dark Souls series. It's not going to be easy either. Basically, we could have just made a feature with 3 entries, one for the entirety of each game. But that would be cheating, and you'd bombard us with criticism and call us lazy, so we're not going to do that. Also, we're only going to be talking about Dark Souls. Bloodborne and Demon Souls don't count because they're not friggin' Dark Souls. Do you see Dark in their name? Dragon Shrine, Dark Souls 2. Fun fact, Dragon Shrine is also known as Screw You Black Knights and That's it, I'm finally going to quit this game. This area is full of enemies that want nothing more than to see you pull your hair out in nervous frustration. But then again, every area is. If you have a tanky build that can effectively block large amounts of damage, Dragon Shrine may not pose that much of a problem for you, but for other mortals, the best course is to take either a bow and arrow and cheese your way through with range, or just say screw it and run past every enemy you see. Iron Keep, Dark Souls 2. This area just flat out sucks. It's difficult, but it's all artificially difficult, which is something that a lot of areas in Dark Souls 2 are actually guilty of. Iron Keep is swarming with enemies that can kill you in less than half a dozen hits, enemies that have broken hitboxes and hit you with weapons when they really shouldn't, and sloppy insta-death scenarios that just feel cheap. On top of all of this, you have to deal with the Smelter Demon too. Not a particularly hard boss when viewed in isolation, but combined with the Fustercluck that is the rest of this area, it just becomes a bit too much to bear. New Londo Ruins, Dark Souls. I hate the ghost in New Londo Ruins is the war cry of the Dark Souls fanbase. Not only can you only properly fight these ghastly creatures under a very specific set of circumstances, but if you get swarmed by too many of them, that means almost certain death. On top of that, you have to carefully navigate the narrow paths this area is full of, and then there are the 4 kings. Compared to some of the other horrors we've seen in this series, they're actually not that bad, but they do a shitload of damage. Irithyll, Dark Souls 3. Irithyll is a hauntingly beautiful place. Too bad you don't really get the chance to hang around and soak in its gothic beauty, because this is yet another one of those Dark Souls areas where just running through like a scared little baby is one of your best possible options. A lot of that is down to those jerks that keep throwing fireballs at you. The guys with curved swords can also provide a bit of a challenge, but they're actually not that hard to deal with if you take them one at a time. The fireball dudes though, man, screw those guys. ARCHDRAGON Peak, Dark Souls 3. ARCHDRAGON Peak is perhaps one of the most difficult and also one of the best areas in the entire Dark Souls series. The Nameless King ranks among the best boss fights in all of Dark Souls, but the path to getting to him is also quite a difficult one. There are enemies that can stun lock you to deal massive amounts of damage, summoners that keep spawning enemies until you kill them, and all of it rarely feels like it's there to increase the challenge artificially. Ringed City, Dark Souls 3. As it stands right now, the Ringed City DLC is the last piece of Dark Souls content we're ever going to get, and what a way it was to sign off for the series. Not only is it a visual treat, like much of Dark Souls 3 itself, it's also one of the most memorable areas in the entire series, boasting of not only 4 great boss battles, but also of a number of other enemies that by themselves are not all too easy to contend with high health counts and the ability to deal devastating amounts of damage. Smoldering Lake, Dark Souls 3. Smoldering Lake, the place that can give endless nightmares to even the most hardened Dark Souls veterans. The area is crawling with dangerous enemies, from mages that just won't stop shooting fireballs, and really, enough with the freaking fireballs already. A massive worm that shoots lasers, which is weird even by Dark Souls standards, more Black Knights, poison and lava hazards, monkeys that jump on your face, and giant enemy crabs. Tomb of the Giants, Dark Souls. Tomb of the Giants has been the cause of many broken controllers since 2011. It's one of the few places in video games that shows you just what despair truly means. For one, it's pitch black and laden with narrow pathways that are all too easy to fall off of, making just navigating the area an absolute pain. Then there are those giant skeleton dogs, and now, I'm a person that absolutely loves dogs, but if I ever saw those giant skeleton dogs in real life, I would beat the ever-living shit out of them. Well, actually, I'd probably just scream like a little kid and run in the opposite direction, but I'd be really angry afterwards, and really, it's the thought that counts. BRUME Tower, Dark Souls 2. BRUME Tower is yet another one of those areas in Dark Souls 2 that is unbelievably difficult in all of the wrong ways. It's one of those areas that feels cheap and frustratingly unfair. The narrow corridors in Brume Tower are crammed full of enemies, while every time you find yourself on a tight ledge, there's usually archers shooting at you while you fight off mobs of even more enemies. Then there's that one area with the giant and the ashen warriors, which, yeah, even the memories of that area are enough to give your blood pressure a dangerous spike. Painted World of ARIAMIS, Dark Souls. The Painted World of ARIAMIS is an optional area, so you don't have to tackle it, but you should. It's tough, but it's really good. So how is it tough? Well, for starters, once you enter, you cannot leave, not without finishing it. That itself is enough to give many people pause. That said, this area is actually a lot easier than most of the others we've listed on this feature. If you don't bring fire weapons or magic though, some of the area's more toxic enemies, and we mean literally toxic, are going to give you hell. Shrine of AMANA, Dark Souls 2. Shrine of AMANA was actually fixed, at least to some extent, by From Software in a post-release patch, so in its current state, it's not nearly as bad as it once was, but man, did it used to be bad. Yet another area from Dark Souls 2 that was just poorly thought out. From enemy projectiles that could track you, to the entire area being flooded, making it even harder for you to dodge. This area was full of frustrating little quirks that could make you rage harder than, I don't know. SEN'S Fortress, Dark Souls. SEN'S Fortress from the first Dark Souls is one of those areas that is much easier on your second go-around once you're familiar with the place and actually know what you're doing. You go through and think, wait, this seems much easier than I remember. That's because when you go through SEN'S Fortress for the first time, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. The area is not only full of tough enemies, it's also crammed full of deadly traps and hazards, and when you don't know what to expect, they can be an absolute nightmare. Frigid Outskirts, Dark Souls 2. Flat out one of the worst areas in the entire Dark Souls series. Oh, and look, it's from Dark Souls 2 again. How shocking. For starters, the entire area is more or less devoid of anything interesting that makes you want to explore. There are next to no structures anywhere. Then there's the fact that the entire wide open space is being barraged by a blinding blizzard, making you blind to absolutely everything, which essentially is just a trick to artificially make the area seem bigger than it is. It's really just a chore to navigate. Then there's those randomly spawning reindeer who I like to call the spawn of the devil, with their bullshit ramming attacks and weird hitboxes. The fact that the boss fight at the end of the level is little more than a copy-paste job does the entire area no favors either. ANOR LONDO, Dark Souls. Unlike a lot of entries on this list, most Dark Souls fans have very fond memories of ANOR LONDO. It's a gorgeous place where the excellent art style of Dark Souls really shines through. It's challenging, yes, but it's challenging the way it should be challenging. Some of the parts are frustrating though, like the narrow tightrope walks you have to do while constantly getting attacked by enemies. In the Cathedral, the fights against the Silver Knights are tough and intense, while the fight against Ornstein and Smough is probably one of the most memorable boss encounters in the entire game. BLIGHTTOWN, Dark Souls. People who haven't played the original Dark Souls often ask, is BLIGHTTOWN really that bad? Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes. Admittedly, it's much more tolerable in Dark Souls Remastered because a huge reason for its general suckiness in the original release was its absolutely horrible frame rate, which could even hit single digits many of the times. Blessedly, this has been fixed in the remaster, but there's so much more to be said about its suckiness than just the frame rate, like the poison-inducing darts, or the fact that the general layout of the place was an absolute mess, or the fact that you could fall to your death at any given moment, or the mosquitoes, or the fire-breathing dogs. The dogs. Why does Dark Souls hate dogs? And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.